Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. Really, it's an honor to be invited by the students. And what I'm going to do here today is go through my career a little bit. We talked about some of this with the students over lunch, and actually in quite a bit of detail. So I'll just briefly go through that. And then the rest of the presentation will be about California's agriculture and about the development of this new Center for Research and Education. And what I'd like you to think about during this presentation is why would we do such a thing at this point in time? Why would we do it at Cal Poly? Why would we do it on strawberries? Because it might look like a typical extension program, but it's not. There's some very important differences, and I hope to show you that, and I want you to be thinking about it as we go along. Okay, here we go. Career path. And this is what we spent all of lunch going over. And as I looked at it, I'm thinking, there's 40 years on here. Seems like yesterday I turned 40. So I don't know how I have 40 years of career. It just happened. And the students, of course, you haven't been around 40 years yet, but wow, it's very sobering, 40 years. And it started, if you go back, if I include, my undergraduate degree at Cal Poly Pomona in about 1987, and then a PhD at UC Riverside in 1994. And it's important that there's these two institutions here. You'll see why in a little bit. I also worked during my undergraduate and then between undergraduate and graduate school, I worked at a place called CL Technology. And these were two women who formed a company that was devoted to citrus research. And I started as a chemist doing pesticide residue analysis. And then I went from there to doing post-harvest research on citrus. And we were looking at penicillium molds and other kinds of decay post-harvest. And that really got me interested in research. And with that background, I went into my PhD at UC Riverside. Right after I finished my PhD, I went down to Imperial Valley County, the Imperial County in California. It borders Arizona and Mexico. It's just east of San Diego. And I spent 3 years there, immersed in production agriculture and extension plant pathology. And I had a really great time. And then I got notice of an opportunity in North Carolina at NC State and was successful in that race. And so I was hired there as an assistant professor, and was tenured. At some point along the way, I was ready to get full professor. And that's when somebody called me and said, hey, would you like to work for industry? We've got a position that would be perfect for you. And I really took a huge risk and left my position at NC State and went to work for Valent USA as a product development manager. And that's a person who develops fungicides, in my case, fungicides, new products, existing products, and I did this for the United States. So I traveled all over the country. I came to this area quite a bit, was working on wheat. We were interested in controlling various rusts on wheat, sclerotinia on canola, and garbanzo beans or chickpea. So I got such a great exposure to the vastness of agriculture in the United States and so many different crops. I really realized that I'd been sheltered in this little world of, first it was citrus, and then it was, sweet potatoes in North Carolina and pickling cucumbers. And then all of a sudden it just, boom, it was just corn and wheat and soybeans and blueberries and raspberries and strawberries and just everything under the sun and anything our products were registered for. I didn't want to keep doing that the rest of my career. I realized that my passion for the job wasn't there. I started looking for something else. And this opportunity at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo came up. And they were looking for somebody who had, believe it or not, all these experiences that I had. They were looking for this blend of extension, research, industry, working with commodity boards. And my background really fit the bill perfectly. So I was lucky enough to land that position, and that's where I am currently. So that's what I'm going to talk about. Is I was hired to build a research and education center around a commodity, and that commodity was strawberries. or is strawberries. So it's important to understand in all of this that there are two different university systems in California. And this is lost on most people if they're not from California or familiar with our universities. One is the UC system, University of California. It has 10 campuses. All told, it's about 280,000 students. It is the land-grant university in California. The other system, and then the two campuses where all of the ag research is done is here at Riverside and at Davis. So the other California university system is the Cal State University system. And it's not like when you hear Washington State or NC State or Michigan State, it's not the same. This is an entirely separate system from the UC system. And its focus is on undergraduate education. There's actually 23 campuses. You can see them all here up and down the state. And it's focused mostly on undergraduate teaching. It started out as a normal schools to train teachers, and then slowly over time evolved into something more. It's really quite an interesting history. The four campuses that focus on ag research are the two Cal Polys, this one in Pomona where I went to school, Cal Poly San Luis Obispo where I now work, and then Fresno State and Chico State. So it's important to realize that there are those two distinctions. The land-grant university is at UC Riverside. Their focus, UC Davis and Riverside, and the focus there is more on research than on undergraduate education. Now, as things happen, there's a lot of changes, and so a lot of Cal State University campuses confer master's degrees, but they don't confer PhDs. That was an agreement in the state between the universities. Another thing that's important to know is California's top crops. It's very unusual for most states to have a bunch of specialty crops be your top crops. So number one, grapes, right? $5.5 billion, that industry. Almonds at 3.5, there's strawberries at 2.7. Most years it's around 3. A lot of times it'll switch places here with lettuce. So each year is a little bit different. And it's not enough to know how much it's worth. Just for reference to Washington State apples would be between strawberries and pistachios at about 2 billion. So another thing to think about here is the acreage. How many acres of almonds are there compared to strawberries? Strawberries are grown on about 40,000 acres. Almonds, 1.3 million acres. So big difference in acreage, right? And then if you do the math, what's the value per acre? And strawberries by far the number one value per acre of all the major crops in California. And you might think, well, people make a lot of money growing strawberries. Well, they might, and then they might lose a lot of money too. So it's a very high stakes, very risky kind of farming when there's that much involved in terms of dollars. Most recently, I hear that it cost about $120,000 per acre to farm strawberries. So that's a very expensive crop to grow. Okay, now let's turn our attention to the formation of the center. This is back in February of 2013. That's our President Armstrong. And that was the then chairman of the board of directors at the California Strawberry Commission, Victor Ramirez, and a lot of legislators and dignitaries from the state. They're signing a memorandum of understanding, which set in motion the creation of the Strawberry Center. Nobody had been hired yet. It was just an agreement between a president at one university and a chairman of the board at another organization called the California Strawberry Commission. But that's how everything starts. Starts with an idea, and then it has to take shape. So why Cal Poly? This is California strawberries. Every one of these dots represents about 50 acres. It's not a perfect map, but it gives you a good idea of where the acreage is located. There's 3 main districts. To the north, Salinas, Watsonville. Santa Maria is very close to Cal Poly, and then Ventura down south. And where I grew up, there were a lot of strawberries once upon a time, but that's shrinking as land values go higher and higher in Southern California. Cal Poly grads populate a lot of the agricultural industry in California. I'm going to tell you why in just a minute. 50% of all of the agricultural Bachelor of Science degrees conferred in California come out of Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. It's the largest undergraduate College of Agriculture. We have over 4,000 students in the College of Agriculture. There's 9 departments. And then, of course, you have leadership that's anxious to do something. And that was important. You can't do it if you don't have leadership that is anxious to engage. And just for reference, there are the locations of UC Davis and UC Riverside in comparison to where the strawberries are grown. Okay, so what was the agreement? The agreement was Strawberry Commission would provide $1 million in funding to cover the first 3 years of our establishment. That basically paid salaries. On the Cal Poly side, they gave up 1/2 of one position so that faculty person could do research on strawberries. That's an unusual appointment because most appointments at Cal Poly are 100% teaching. This was an unusual appointment. They gave us lab and office space, and then they gave us land to work on. And Cal Poly has a lot of land. There's over 10,000 acres of land, about 80, 90 acres right on campus, and then a lot of range, and there's another 3,200 acres north of Santa Cruz, Swanton Pacific Ranch. So there's enough land on campus to do this, and we have a very beautiful situation where the fields are right outside our office where we work and our research. And we started with 4 or 3 full-time equivalents. Kelly Ivers was hired first, and then I was hired a couple months later, and just so happens that we were both at North Carolina State University, and then we're working together at Cal Poly. So that was serendipitous and very good because we had a great working relationship, and we hired Ryan Brantley to be our research associate, and then we had a half-time administrative assistant. And with that, we're off and running. But what do we do? We have people, but what are we going to do? That was the question. And so we let the Strawberry Commission's request for proposals, which outlines its research priorities, be our guide. And Kelly and I are both plant pathologists. And we looked at this list and we said, well, farming without fumigants, that's all about soil-borne pathogens. Management of soil-borne diseases, that's pathology. Breeding for disease resistance is pathology. And then all of these major pests down here, that's all pathology. So a big part of the research objectives for the commission were pathology. And we decided, let's start at the top. Let's look at fumigants. Let's look at soil-borne pathogens and diseases. But before we could do any of that, we had to figure out how to grow strawberries. I wasn't coming into a campus where I could say, I'd like 1/2 acre of strawberries, and then this team of people would then grow them for me. We had to do this ourselves, and we had plenty of help from our growers. They were ready to share any of their production practices with us. This is Santa Maria, and it's a beautiful field. It's probably 100 acres there of strawberries. And I went down and saw how they formed the beds. Like, wow, those are beautiful beds. Look at how nice and crisp all the edges are. Sandy loam soil. Wow, wouldn't that be great? That's what we're going to do at Cal Poly. And so we tried to do that, and we ended up with this, I don't know, there was like all these bricks in the ground. We'd put in the plow, and then all these bricks came up, and we were working with George Chavez and his counterpart here, and they were talking about, well, how are we going to fix this? And actually, they did a really nice job. They disked that down, they fluffed it up a little bit with a couple of other implements, and I had a lot of respect for farmers, but then I have so much more respect after going through this whole process with farmers and realizing just how difficult it was to get this. This is a silty clay. I was looking at a sandy loam in that previous picture, right? So you can't manage those two soils the same way when it comes to forming a bed. And we eventually got this worked out, planted a field of Albion strawberries, and this was actually one of the most satisfying days in my entire career. was to do this ourselves. We were out there hauling the pipe, turning on the water, harvesting the berries. We did, and we had a lot of help, but we were also out there ourselves doing every bit of it. And these are Albion strawberries. Albion, if you know anything about strawberry varieties, it's a really great tasting variety, but it's not being grown anymore because it doesn't yield as much as current varieties. But we were selling this on campus. We sold it in a local grocery store, and they thought, wow, this strawberry center at Cal Poly has figured out, they've already solved the problem of flavor. How did they do that so fast? And we had to tell them, thank you, but we're just growing an older variety that is better tasting. They said, well, you just need to keep doing that. And so does everybody else. Well, it's hard to convince growers to grow something that tastes great when you can grow something that tastes almost as good and yields about twice as much, right? That's hard. That's a hard sell. One thing we noticed that first year was just, we were in a field that was infested with verticillium, but we didn't know it. And the variety started dying. This Portola, man, it's just completely dead. And this is our Monterey. This is our most popular variety in the state. About 35% of the acres are grown to Monterey. And then Albion and San Andreas look pretty good in the presence of verticillium. So we thought, wow, there's an opportunity to do something for the growers. Do they really know? I know they know that there's differences in susceptibility, but have we really gone the distance on this? Are we quantifying it in a way that would be helpful to our industry and visible to them as well? And it turns out that this was something that they really wanted. And so we started screening. The very next year, we got the breeding programs to give us the germplasm so that we could put it in these plots and make side-by-side comparisons with multiple breeding programs. And here's how one of those years looks for one of those diseases. This is macrophomina. I'll show you another chart in a minute about verticillium. Don't try to read this. This goes from 0 to 100. And what I want to show you is that it's almost gone from 100 down. This is 95 varieties. And down here, it's almost 0. So that's showing you just how much variation there is in susceptibility to this one pathogen. And each year we've been doing this same experiment with new entries each time. This is what it looks like with verticillium wilt, but this time I have it organized by breeding program. So you can see University of Florida, University of California here, Plant Sciences, Planasa, Lassen Canyon, and Driscoll's. These are all, you can see each one of them has this kind of range of susceptibility from very low to quite high. And so this was not a new finding, but it was important that we show these things side by side. Nobody had ever seen them side by side. And if you know anything about California strawberries, you know that the intellectual property surrounding varieties is kind of hotly contested. There's a lot of litigation around this. And so people are careful about letting their germplasm out to just anybody. And we were very grateful that they decided to work with us and collaborate and let the industry see this comparison side by side. A little bit later, I'll show you our field day where we showcase this to the industry. So we've expanded the verticillium to anthracnose, powdery mildew, and macrophomina. And we've looked at over 7 years of this, over 500 entries, 330 genotypes. That's about 65% cultivars, and the remaining are elite breeding lines. And we've done this with 7 different breeding programs. And these are really the most important, all of the most important breeding programs that we have in California and maybe the world. And then those results are available on the Strawberry Commission's website and our own website. And this is one of the ways that's made available. This is an interactive table that's online, and you can sort by susceptibility to macrophomina, verticillium, fusarium, or phytophthora. You can sort by, this one's called day neutrality, or short days, or day neutral varieties. They're sensitive to day length. And then you can sort it by alphabetically or whatever. So this is a nice interactive table for growers to use. Select appropriate varieties given whatever the circumstances are in their field. So we take that, we want to keep doing more with that information. And this is one of our master students, Yu Chen Wang, and one of the years that she was doing this experiment, she had a really low amount of macrophomina. You can see here is only 50%. You saw that first graph, it was all the way to almost to 100. What would account for now a similar group of strawberry cultivars, genotypes? Why would we now all of a sudden have 50% would be our maximum amount of disease? Well, one of the thoughts was that it was because of the low temperatures. That year was exceptionally cool. And macrophomina is a heat-loving pathogen. It's when you get high temperatures and drought stress, that's what we know about that pathogen when it really is exacerbated. So she looked at 5 years of data and she correlated the soil temperature in November over 5 seasons with these 8 varieties and showed a pretty strong relationship between higher soil temperatures and higher final plant mortality, which we hadn't thought about before, but makes some sense given that pathogen, given if you think about it getting infected early and then the pathogen working on the host all that time. And then that led us to another look at how could we manipulate the temperature then? Is that possible? Well, there's lots of different plastic colors. We decided to choose the 2 extremes, black and white, and then coupled with that, different number of irrigation lines. So these are drip irrigation lines. The arrows represent where the plants are planted, and the blue circles are where the drip lines are. So you can reduce moisture stress and temperature both through the plastic mulch color and the amount of water that you're putting out or the distribution of that water. And I'll show you just 1 year's data, tremendous reduction on white plastic. The drip lines didn't seem to make near as much difference as the plastic color. That's this last year. The year before, I got about the same response, a similar reduction by both the color and the water. But definitely there is a massive effect that is caused by temperature. Another student that we have currently, Joseph Ramirez, working with a company called Aerial Plot. They looked at this NDRE. This is called, remind me what the N stands for, Mary? Normalized. Normalized difference, red edge. And this is a season-long look at chlorophyll content in the leaves. The thing that we found out, though, is it might be biased by just the size of the plant. And the size of the plant is different based on variety. So it's a little bit, you're getting some conflation of plant size and also susceptibility or plant health. But this is a really interesting way of looking at the same information just over the entire season. And so each year we try to bring something new to the table on these screens. Now I don't want to embarrass Mary, but this is some half of the work that she did. One of her chapters in her master's thesis was on a disease survey, and she started in Watsonville, Salinas, and then moved to Santa Maria. And then we have another student doing Ventura, the southernmost district. And this was a really interesting, she went out and collected as many samples in as many fields as she could get to. Each field was sampled the same way, 8 plants. We took the samples and they were combined in the lab, and then we used RPA to find which of these pathogens were present. And so you can see there's I'll show you some of the results here. This is for Watsonville, Salinas. You can see kind of an equal distribution of the 4 main pathogens, those being macrophomina, fusarium wilt, verticillium wilt, and Phytophthora root rot. Now for Santa Maria, there's 2 different crops. There's a fall planted crop and there's a summer planted crop. And much higher proportion of macrophomina, and both summer and fall had a lot of macrophomina, and then less from verticillium and fusarium. Now, this has been extended this year. We have another master's student, Sam Samard, who is doing this in Ventura, and you can see one of those pie wedges is absolutely missing, and that's Phytophthora. And Fusarium has gotten bigger, and so has Macrophomina. And you'd think Macrophomina, being the southernmost district, a little bit warmer there, but the Fusarium piece is confusing to us. This is where we found a new race of Fusarium. It was discovered by Peter Henry at the USDA, and he's been working with us worked with Mary on the Salinas-Watsonville survey, and is now working with us again on this survey and doing the Fusarium part of it. It's a nice collaboration. I think this is going to help us put a value on the amount of losses that we have due to soil-borne pathogens and the diseases that they cause. We're going to try to be doing that next. And so all those dead plant counts that you were doing, Mary, that's probably going to end up being an estimate of how much yield loss was due to soil-borne pathogens. Another thing that we do for the growers is perform disease diagnostics. We have a clinic where all we do is strawberry diseases, and just show you what the main pathogens we're looking at. Again, you see all the four big root pathogens, and then some of the numbers there as to how many of each of those we're finding. Each year it's a little bit different, somewhere between, say, 100 and 160 samples in a year. And Dr. Hewa Vitharana, who many of you know was a student and a postdoc here at Washington State, is our lead pathologist at the center and runs the diagnostic clinic as well. Okay, another thing that we do, again, typical extension type work. We're doing a lot of fungicide evaluations. This is something the growers want. They want to know what works and what doesn't. And how do you find that out? You do these field trials. So we've looked at botrytis fruit rot, powdery mildew, and then some chemigation. That's application of some of these fungicides through drip irrigation and their effect on Macrophomina and verticillium. But we've looked at over 400 treatments over these 7 years, 200 unique products, 45% of those being organic and the remaining being conventional. We've helped bring about 7 products to market, and these results are also available on our website or on the UCIPM website. And it looks something like this. Long, don't expect you to read any of this really, just to notice that this is for strawberries. These are the fungicides. These are their frac groups. And then these are all the diseases. Here's gray mold. And that's botrytis fruit rot. And so there's a 4-star system. If you get 4 stars, you're highly effective. And if you get dashes, we don't see any efficacy there, or we don't have any data for it. Because this is a teaching institution, I have a small teaching role. I have a 10% teaching appointment, and we do that in a variety of ways. There's a lot of guest lectures and groups that want to come out to our fields. This is the class that I developed called Current Issues in the Strawberry Industry, and we invite people from the industry to talk to our students about some current issue in the industry. And it's really been a fantastic way to get the industry to come and see what we're doing, to get them to share their industry experience with students. Sometimes they leave there hiring 2 students. And that's also a fantastic benefit of having the Strawberry Center at Cal Poly. So what this has ended up being is 3 areas of focus. And I'm going to have to really hustle here to show you some of the automation stuff. But there's our pathology. Those are our targets in pathology, the soil-borne pathogens and the above-ground pathogens. Entomology, those are the targets there. It's mostly ligus and spider mites. Automation, you're going to see some, and I'll show you how automation and entomology really interface here, because there's some things that are devoted to a ligus control. So our automation director is Dr. John Lind, and these are the 9 projects that he's currently working on. I'm going to show you some videos from about 5 of these. And these are the 5, so we'll just go one by one. And this is all engineering, but it's really fascinating to see how well this works. This is like the lygus bug. If you don't know what it looks like and what it does to strawberries is it feeds on the seeds during fruit development and causes deformation of the fruit or cat facing. And we lose about $100 to $200 million a year due to the losses caused by this bug. A device that was developed a long time ago from information actually started as backpack things that entomologists were using to suck up bugs and do their research, and ended up being this device. There's just a fan up here that is sucking the air up through here and then impaling the bugs on that baffle. But we took a look at that and said there's probably a way to improve upon that. And so with some Cal Poly ag engineering students, namely Jack Wells, we started modeling what that would look like and how we might improve it. And you can see here, these represent bodies of certain weight and what this fan is going to do to those. And you can see some are falling and some are rising, right? And that actually turned out to be true when we put some little reeds underneath those fans. You could see that the ones on the edges were lying down or barely being picked up, and the ones in the middle were being sucked up pretty strongly, right? It was the wrong design. It works for a vacuum cleaner maybe, but it doesn't work in this situation. And so what was developed is this, we call it the double barrel bug vacuum. And these are just cylinders instead of that other shape, right? And we're sucking up about 2.5 times as much lygus as we were previously. So you can see that this is what it looks like side by side. Look at the foliage, how it's being sucked into there, how much force there is. So this has been a major improvement to one of the major ways, non-chemical means of controlling lygus. Another thing we've been looking at is the use of UVC as a means of controlling powdery mildew. Powdery mildew and UVC, it's something that other researchers have done. David Gaduri at Cornell, also Fumi Takeda and another researcher at the USDA in Kearneysville have done a lot of previous work on this. Wojciech Janusewicz, that's the name I was trying to remember. So these are autonomous robots that have to work at night because the mechanisms for repair are not operating at night in the fungus. And so you have to do it when the sun's down, and then these crawl through the field very slowly. We haven't been working on necessarily the efficacy of this. That's already been established by other researchers. And that continued. Some people at Driscoll's, Kelly Ivers and Jenny Broom and her team, looked at it and published a paper on that. So our effort has been on implementation. How do we get this to be implemented? There's UVC is in the wavelength from 100 to 280. And this is one of the developments. This is a company that put this device together. They now can treat 5 beds at a time. And so we are looking at that currently, at how effective. We think it's effective. We know it's effective against powdery mildew. Is it effective against anything else? Maybe lygus eggs or mite eggs or mite adults or nymphs of a lygus. We want to know if we could combine maybe the powdery mildew and the bug vacuum together. Would that be a way of adding value to this? So now it's just a question of it works, but to what degree and how much does it cost? Another thing that some of the growers do in the Salinas-Watsonville area is they punch these holes by hand. He's got a backpack propane tank, and that's a heated tip, and he's punching holes in the plastic, and that's where they're going to put the transplants. This device our automation team developed. It'll do the work of about 10 people doing that same thing. And kind of get a sense of how big the holes are. Though one of the problems with plastic mulch and hole punches is that they punch it. This punches a pretty big hole. which is good during stand establishment. The sprinklers come on, you want that water to go into the soil around the roots and not just hit the plastic and run off into the furrows. So sometimes they actually pay somebody to make those holes a little bit bigger, one by one. That's pretty expensive labor. And a way around that was to devise a different mechanism. Now you're going to see a wheel, the typical punch wheel. And this is the typical punch wheel here. And up here, you see these blue tabs. Those tines, as they go around, they're going to hit a little tongue, and it's going to rip the plastic a little bit and open it up. See what it's doing right there. So that hole is no longer just a slit. It's got a little tear in it too. And so that's going to help water ingress when they turn on the sprinklers. Look at it compared to what's on the left. There's that little tiny slit. So that's going to help during stand establishment and relieve a little bit of labor as well. Another one is hoop arch removal. You can see how difficult some strawberries are grown under plastic tunnels, and these hoops are under a lot of tension, and trying to get those out after a year and all the rain and weather and so forth, you can see this is kind of a dangerous thing to be doing. And this is our prototype of the hoop arch removal system. It's not doing perfectly yet, but it certainly is an improvement on the labor aspect of this. So this is something we're still working on, and you can see that sometimes it misses, it doesn't pull it out all the way. But I think in all but one case, it got it in this video. And then processing. Watch this picker. Some strawberries go to processing. He just sliced off the cap, the calyx, turned them upside down, sliced it across those knives. The calyx fell on the ground. The fruit went into the freezer tray. This is what you make jams and jellies and juices out of. And they've been trying to find a way to automatically decap the berries in the processing unit instead of in the field. So you can see here the way that the fruit are handled. They're singulated, and then there's an automatic arm that sees the fruit and finds where the cap is and removes the cap. Pretty impressive, right? Engineers are, I mean, they can just make, it's unbelievable. It's the question of now, how fast and how accurate is this? You can see occasionally and they get it wrong. You know, there's a fruit that gets blasted right through the middle or something like that. But this isn't yet used by everybody, but it's getting pretty close, right? Okay. Let's see, where am I? I got about I'm gonna zoom through this, no pun intended. The annual field day is something we started out with just a handful of people. We thought we would get 80 people. We had almost 150 people on the first year that we did it. And then every year since then, it's gone up. Our students get a chance to present, and our industry gets a chance to see what we're doing. Our students that get master's degrees with us, they usually have a dozen or more opportunities to speak to growers in these kinds of settings. And it's fantastic training for extension work. You can see here for our 2022 field day, we had almost 450 people, about $70,000 in sponsorships. Just in 2023, we increased our sponsorships by 20,000. This has ended up being a really great connecting point for us and for the industry. All right. I'm going to have to blow through this quickly. I wanted to make a point about doing research to impress your peers or to serve growers. And I'm happy to report that we get to be, it's nice to be able to do both. When there's a choice to be made, we're going to serve the growers. We're not in it to impress our peers. All right, have to skip the Strawberry Academy. I just want to mention that our students are leaving, working with us. They're going into industry in California. They're going off to other universities and getting their PhDs. And we've been around long enough now to have a lot of people doing this. And for example, Scott Casaboom has finished up with us, finished at Maryland, and is now in a faculty position at Cornell University working on apples. So the apple pathologist might have a chance to work together with Scott. Excellent scientist. Here's the stuff we're doing online, where you can go and learn more about what we're doing. And this is our staff and crew who went from those 4 people that we started with. And we're now at about 12 people: pathology, entomology, operations, automation. And then when we all get together, there's about 50 of us. Now, this is including the students. And you can see Dr. Vitharana there in the front. That's it. I think, I don't know if I went over time, but it's pretty darn close. Thank you all for your attention. If you could back the lights. Do we have time for questions? Okay, fire away. Or anybody out there in the Zoom audience? Yes.
I was just curious, you said that you weren't working on the efficacy of that UVC method, that little robot, but does that not impact the plants really? It does impact the human?
Yeah, good question. Does it impact the plants? We haven't seen any negative effect on the plants.
Can you repeat that question?
That's also
Gerald?
something that was part of previous investigations. But it takes a lot more than that dosage to affect. And it really doesn't, it's not even the plant, right? It's just the bloom. If it affected the bloom bloom's a lot more delicate than the leaves, for example. Yeah. But
would you mind repeating the questions?
You're definitely going to torch.
See, they muted.
plant.
They can't hear us.
Yeah. It needs a very brief exposure. Other questions? In the back, and then.
Can you guys hear us in Pullman? They can't hear us. Can you, can you let them know who's
yeah, so that was the diagnostic table, and we were finding Pythium, but we weren't reporting it because we felt like those were minor pathogens that were not causing disease. But I think Dr. Hewa Vitharana started seeing more Pythium, and since we were getting some negative results, we didn't find any of the 4 major pathogens. So now she's actually looking more closely at Pythium and what Sam's number causing plant mortality. That probably, if it's involved, it may be involved in combination with other pathogens.
Yeah, so Thelma, we can ask Bill to repeat the questions because we can't hear them.
For Zoom. That question was about the diagnostic table and why in previous years the Pythium row showed zeros or dashes. And the reason was, it wasn't because there were none, it was because we weren't reporting it. Yeah. So it's really common is the bottom line. And we're wondering, what is it doing?
Can you ask like
how impactful is it to soil plant health?
For botrytis on strawberries?
Have they looked at UVC light for control of botrytis on strawberries?
The question was, do they still fumigate strawberries, or has that gone away? You're probably all familiar with the ban on methyl bromide. That occurred. We no longer use methyl bromide, but there are other fumigants in use. So chloropicrin and 1,3-D are still fumigants that are in use. There are K-PAM, VAPAM are also in use. So there are fumigants still being used, but they're being more regulated each year. And so there is a desire to farm strawberries without the use of fumigants. I think there was one up here. Go ahead, Tim.
For this commercial production, is how many times of harvest strawberry for a single season, and how that for timing of the fungus application.
So the question is, how many times are strawberries harvested in a typical season, and then how does that impact our ability to get in and spray.
Yeah.
For say botrytis or powdery mildew.
Yes.
So it's a balance, it's definitely a dance. So strawberries are harvested twice a week. And they are harvested twice a week for about 7 months, depending on where you're growing it and the market conditions. So then you've got to get in there between harvests, and you have to use something that has a short re-entry interval and a short pre-harvest interval. And usually that's 12 hours and 0 or 1 day. And that's how you do it. So as soon as they're done picking, they're in there with a rig spraying, and then there's 3 days before the next pick, or 4 days. Yeah, so it's carefully orchestrated so that they're abiding by the label. Yeah, good question. There was a here and then I'll go.
It's more of is there a reason not having breeders or physiologists?
Is there a reason that we don't have on our team, say, a breeder or a physiologist? Yes. One would be money, and two would be that there's breeders at UC Davis, and we figure that there's plenty of competition in the breeding space, and anyways, there hasn't been a call from the industry to say, hey, you know, would you breed as well? We'd like you at Cal Poly to start a program. That would require a lot more money, by the way. And then physiology or horticulture, I could see adding somebody like that to our team. We just, it may come. It just isn't there yet. And it's largely just a question of evolution, I guess, and hitting the top priorities first and then the lower priorities later. And it may be that we end up with a horticulturist, another pathologist, let's say. Maybe it's at some point there's some breeding effort going on, but maybe a breeding effort that would complement what's already out there. Yeah.
So what percent of the market is organic now, and how do they be able to do this?
What percent of the market is organic in California? The last survey, I do these every year, it was 13%. It's growing. We grow more organic strawberries than anywhere else in the world. That translates to about 5,500 acres of organic strawberries. What was the other part of your question?
How do they deal with this? They just rotate fields around, or?
For soil, yeah, they don't go into the fields where they need to fumigate, right? They go into a place that's clean, or they use a resistant variety. But yeah, they're gonna suffer massively if they go into an infested field with an organic crop. Yeah.
Say that I think if we need to work through the unusual rock pop, like some making clear people on Zoom, because I don't think there's a way for them to talk to us.
This Rashi Baral from Bernie has a question. She wanted to know if we use UV light for the stress management in addition to powdery mildew.
That work has already been done. It's effective on botrytis, but in the field it doesn't work. It's for whatever reason, I think the botrytis is hiding under other leaves, or it's too robust, the infection is too deep, whatever it might be. It's not effective under field conditions. Yeah, it might
Why did you your volume on your computer?
my volume's up pretty high. I see everybody else is muted though. Sorry about the technology glitches on this one. Is there a way, are you able to hear the questions? Okay. If you put your question in the chat, I'll read it there. Were there other questions here in the meantime? Yes.
In your regulatory field files, for example, the different breeding programs with everybody's work, or more like they look for their own stuff?
Haven't had any. weird conflicts. The question was about conflicts if the breeding programs come and only look at their own, or do they look at everybody's? They look at everybody's because they're all mixed in there in a randomized complete block design. So whatever number of entries there are, they're randomized in there and they're walking past them all. And at the field day, they see them all. And there's a handout that looks just like what I showed you. So they all see very quickly. And some of them, commented recently, oh, I didn't realize this was like a public competition, because you could stack the deck, obviously. You could say, well, the only stuff I'm gonna give you is my resistance stuff. So everybody else is gonna have this high to low, and ours are just gonna be down here at 0. And then we're gonna look great in front of everybody. But we have obviously would discourage that. We try to get them to submit bookmarks, bookends, highly susceptible, highly resistant, and then a lot of stuff in between. Yeah, go ahead again. Yeah, good question. How do we fund the variety trials? If it's a cultivar, then it's funded by the Strawberry Commission. If it's an elite breeding line, it's a numbered genotype, then the companies pay. It started out, the commission was paying for everything. Then after a while, they were like, well, maybe the breeding programs should have a little more skin in the game. I don't see any typed questions in the chat. Sam, you want to wrap it up?